We have this story this morning of a Jewish peasant who rose and walked up out of his tomb 2,000 years ago. And it's the cornerstone of our faith. But it's only the cornerstone if we ask the question, why? Why does this story matter? It's not enough that we have a one-time event from 2,000 years ago. That's not worth celebrating this Easter morning. A memory is not the only thing that keeps us going. We celebrate this story this morning, and we keep celebrating it because it gives us a story worth living. In the words of another pastor, we do not believe resurrection, we do not consider resurrection, we live resurrection. Now, we live Good Friday, too. If you read the headlines this morning, that reality of Good Friday is all too real. We live it collectively and we live it individually. We live death, we live loss, we live agony and shame and humiliation. We live betrayal, we live failure. We know that story. And I could list for us all the ways it happens, all the deaths we know, the death of life, the death of identity, the death of self, the death of hope. But I don't really have to because you all know it. You all know it because you live it. And I don't know each one of you, but I know that if you are human, you come this morning with scars from the cross. The promise of Easter Sunday is not that we celebrate a magic trick 2,000 years ago in occupied Palestine. The promise of Easter Sunday is that Good Friday is not the end. The Good Friday stories we live, have lived, are living, will live, they are not the end. That is a story worth showing up for. In fact, there is no end, says Easter Sunday. There is a beginning into a new life that we could never have imagined. There is a living into sobriety. There is a living into coming out of the hell of depression. There is a living of healing of family rifts, conversations we never thought we'd have, apologies we never thought we'd hear, changed behavior we never thought we'd see. There is the living of discovering that our lives can, in fact, bear the unbearable. We live resurrection. And we don't have to prove how good we are in order to live it. This is not a story that says once we get it all together, then we can live. This is not a story that says, well, once we've lost the weight, figured out how to actually use our day planner, figured out how to show up as our shiniest, best, most together selves, that's when we'll live. No, my friends. This is a story of a God who shows up when we are a mess. When we are in the midst of ugly crying, snot rolling down our faces, broken, vulnerable. Mary is weeping outside the tomb. 2 days ago, she saw her beloved teacher die the worst death he could. Yesterday, she spent in miserable, anxious, helpless waiting. She hasn't slept in 2 nights. And now they won't even let her anoint this beloved body. Even dignity and closure is denied her. There's nothing left. She is broken. And Jesus shows up. And he's not recognizable. Who knows why? But she doesn't see the Jesus she was expecting to see. Probably partly because she was expecting to see a horizontal Jesus laid out on a tomb. And this guy is living, breathing, and saying her name. That's what he says in the midst of her mess. He does not say, girl, wash your face. He does not say, woman, pull yourself together. He says her name. He speaks to the deepest, most integral, true part of her. He calls her forth out of her weeping. Mary. And in that name, in that calling to her, what he's saying is, I'm right here. You don't have to go searching for me. You don't have to go looking for me. I'm right here. And so then he says, do not cling to me. Now, whether that's because she's making a lunge for him or whether that's because she's trying to go back to the life they knew, I don't know. But what he is saying is that this resurrected life is not a throwback to the life they had before. He's showing up with wounds. Life has changed. And the point of the resurrection is not for Jesus to go around thumbing his nose at the Roman authorities and the religious leaders saying, not dead after all. The point of the resurrection is new life. New life. Not the life they had, not the life they envisioned, but this new life in the midst of broken death. This new life that was not possible. The guy died. There is no hope. And yet there he is, calling her name. And he says to her, go, tell my brothers that I am ascending to your God and my God, to your Father and my Father. Somehow, the good news of the resurrection, according to Jesus, is not the fact that he's upright and walking. The good news of the resurrection is that he is ascending. And what's that? Well, don't get mad at me, but it's a mystery. And on the surface, playing the mystery card can kind of be the easy ticket out. Boom, I don't know, it's a mystery. But it is, and that's actually the good news of the faith, because why would we believe a faith that we could reduce to a diagram or a bullet point list? The whole point of faith is that we keep living into it, keep leaning into it, keep taking the risk of believing this ridiculous story. And the good news of the story this morning is not only that Jesus got up and that there is new life where there was none possible, but that he gets up in order to ascend. There is a point to the resurrection. It's not just, ooh, look what I did. It is, I am going back to God. So here is my take on the ascension for this particular Easter morning. For John's gospel, and that's the story that we have this morning, is from the story of the Gospel of John. For John's gospel, Jesus is on a journey. Jesus is actually the Word made flesh. And the Word existed long before Mary of Nazareth ever got pregnant. The Word is a part of God that is living, pulsing, alive with God's love and creativity and extraordinary power. The Word is around long before any of us. The Word was around from the dawn of creation. And the Word comes to earth and chooses to contain itself in the womb of an unwed teenage mother from the sticks in occupied Palestine. And somehow the Word gets born into this world, takes on human flesh, blood, and bone, and walks among us, weeps with us, laughs with us, dies, resurrects, and ascends. It does one big loop in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, coming from God in among us, living our pain and our joy, and ascending back to God. And here's the mystery. Somehow, in this loop, in this journey, in this extraordinary adventure in human flesh, the Word pulls all of us right into the middle of God. When Jesus comes to earth, when the Word is made flesh, Jesus is offering with his very body the relationship that he has with God. That's an introduction to the Trinity, and that's a whole other sermon. But somehow, in this journey, Jesus is saying, I will walk the earth with you. I will walk with your bodies. And when I ascend to the Father, you are invited in. That's the good news of the resurrection. That is the good news of Easter. Somehow, in this ascension, there is an open-armed, open-handed invitation that has not stopped 2,000 years later, that is grabbing onto us, not letting us go, and saying, you too are my beloved children, and nothing you can do can change that. We live that. We live resurrection, and we live the ascension, and we live always leaning into God. It's not a life that we have to earn. It's not a life that we have to work hard for. It's not a life for which we have to prove ourselves worthy. It is a life that comes to us in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of our weeping, and speaks our name. And all you and I are called to do is take a deep breath and turn to it. Thanks be to God.